The scream tore through Emma Preston's throat as rough hands shoved her backward, and she stumbled toward the stone well in the center of Provo's dusty main square, her worn calico dress catching on the rough edges as she collapsed against the cool stone rim. The August sun of 1878 beat down mercilessly on Utah's parched earth, and the three men who had just robbed her of everything she owned were already mounting their horses, laughing as they rode away with the small leather pouch that contained the last of her money, the deed to her family's burned homestead, and the only photograph she had of her parents. She pressed her forehead against the sun-warmed stone and let the tears come, hot and bitter, streaming down her dusty cheeks as her shoulders shook with the force of her grief. Helena Thompson had been crying for what felt like hours when she heard the soft jingle of spurs approaching, but she did not lift her head, could not bear to see pity or worse, yet mockery in another stranger's eyes. She had traveled 3 weeks by wagon train from Kansas, only to arrive in Provo yesterday to discover that her uncle, who had promised her a home and work in his general store, had died 2 months prior from pneumonia. The store had been sold to pay his debts, and she had no family left, no money, no prospects, and nowhere to turn in this harsh mountain territory. "Madam." The voice was deep and gentle, roughened by wind and sun, but carrying a warmth that made her breath catch. "Whatever happened, it cannot be so terrible that you should weep alone at a well in the middle of the day." Helena finally lifted her tear-streaked face and found herself looking into the most striking pair of green eyes she had ever seen. The man stood perhaps 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered beneath a dusty brown vest and cotton shirt, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat that he now removed, revealing thick dark hair the color of mahogany. He appeared to be in his mid-20s, with strong features weathered by sun and hard work, and something in his expression spoke of genuine concern rather than the idle curiosity she had encountered from other townspeople. "I have nothing," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They took everything. The men who just rode out of town. They grabbed my bag when I was drawing water, and now I have nothing at all." The cowboy's jaw tightened, and he turned his gaze toward the direction the riders had gone, his hand instinctively moving to rest on the worn handle of the pistol at his hip. But then he looked back at her and his expression softened. "Your tears end today," he said firmly, extending his hand toward her. "Come home with me." Helena stared at him, certain she had misheard. "I beg your pardon." "My name is Elijah Palmer, and I run a horse ranch about 5 miles north of town with my younger brother. We have a house with a spare room, clean water, food, and honest work if you are willing. Whatever happened to you, whatever you lost, you do not need to face it alone." He kept his hand extended, steady and sure. "I know you have no cause to trust a stranger, but I give you my word as a Christian man that you will be safe under my roof, and I will help you get back on your feet." She searched his face for any sign of deception or ulterior motive, but found only sincerity in those green eyes. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory, warning her about trusting men she did not know, but desperation and something deeper, some instinct she could not name, made her reach out and place her trembling hand in his. His palm was calloused and warm, and he helped her to her feet with surprising gentleness. "Helena Thompson," she said quietly. "I came here from Kansas to live with my uncle, but he passed before I arrived, and now those men have stolen the last money I had." Elijah's expression darkened. "I know who they were. Dalton brothers, all 3 of them, been causing trouble through these parts for months. Sheriff is either too scared or too bought to do anything about it." He glanced down at her hand, still clasped in his, and seemed to realize he was holding it longer than necessary. He released it quickly, a faint flush coloring his tan cheeks. "I am sorry for your loss, Miss Thompson. Your uncle was that Henry Thompson who ran the general store." "Yes," Helena said, fresh tears threatening. "Did you know him? Good man, honest merchant." "He spoke often of his niece back in Kansas, said you were coming out to help him with the store." Elijah picked up the bucket she had dropped when she was attacked and drew fresh water from the well, offering it to her. "Drink. Then we will get you somewhere safe." Helena drank deeply, the cool water soothing her parched throat. As she handed the bucket back, she noticed several townspeople watching them from doorways and windows, their expressions ranging from curious to disapproving. She flushed, suddenly aware of how this must look, a strange woman accepting help from a bachelor rancher. Elijah must have noticed her discomfort because he said quietly, "My brother's wife lives at the ranch too. Isabel is a fine woman, and she will be glad of another woman's company. It gets lonely for her out there with just me and my brother Thomas." The mention of another woman at the house eased some of Helena's anxiety, and she nodded. "I do not wish to be a burden, Mr. Palmer. If you truly have work, I will earn my keep. Call me Elijah, please. And you will not be a burden." He gestured toward a handsome chestnut stallion tied at the hitching post nearby. "That is Redwood. He is gentle despite his size. Can you ride?" "I grew up on a farm. I can ride," Helena assured him, though it had been months since she had been on a horse. Elijah untied Redwood and mounted in one fluid motion, then reached down to help Helena up. She hesitated only a moment before taking his hand and letting him pull her up behind him. The horse shifted slightly under the added weight, but remained calm as Elijah had promised. Helena had no choice but to wrap her arms around Elijah's waist to keep her balance, and she felt him tense slightly at the contact, before urging Redwood into a steady walk out of town. They rode in silence for the first mile, the rhythmic movement of the horse and the vast expanse of Utah landscape spreading before them. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow even in late summer, and the valley stretched wide and golden with dried grasses. The Wasatch Range dominated the eastern horizon, stark and beautiful against the brilliant blue sky. "How long have you been in Provo?" Helena finally asked, needing to break the silence that had grown heavy with unspoken questions. "About 4 years now. Came out from Missouri after the war ended, though I was too young to fight in it. My father died when I was 16 and my mother passed a year later. Thomas and I decided to start fresh somewhere new, so we headed west." Elijah's voice held the careful neutrality of someone who had learned to keep painful memories at bay. "We started with nothing but 2 horses and whatever we could carry. Worked cattle drives for 2 years, saved every penny and bought the land 3 years ago. Started with 6 horses, and now we have 32, breeding and training them for ranchers and the occasional cavalry contract." "That must have taken incredible hard work," Helena said, genuinely impressed. "Thomas deserves as much credit as I do. He is better with the actual training, has a gift for understanding horses. I handle the business side, the breeding decisions, the sales." He paused, then added, "Isabel came into our lives 2 years ago. She was a widow, husband died in a mining accident up near Salt Lake City. Thomas met her when he was delivering horses to a ranch nearby, and they were married within 3 months. She brought her young daughter Sarah with her. The girl is 5 now, bright as a button." Helena felt herself relaxing slightly as Elijah talked, his voice steady and reassuring. "It sounds like you have built a good life here." "We have done well enough," Elijah acknowledged, "but it is not an easy life. The ranch demands constant work, and the winters can be brutal in these mountains. If you come home with us, Miss Thompson, I want you to understand what you are agreeing to. It will not be luxury or ease. I am not afraid of hard work, Helena said firmly. I worked my family's farm from the time I could walk until we lost everything in a prairie fire 2 years ago. My parents died trying to save our barn. I have been working as a seamstress and cook for families in Kansas since then, saving every penny to make the journey here for a fresh start. She felt Elijah's back muscles shift as he turned slightly to look at her over his shoulder. I am sorry. That is a heavy burden of grief to carry. We all carry something, Helena replied quietly. The question is what we do with it. They rode on, and Helena found herself noticing details about the man whose waist she clung to. He sat his horse with natural ease, moving with the animal rather than against it. His shirt smelled of leather and sage and honest sweat, not unpleasant but distinctly masculine. When he pointed out landmarks, his voice carried enthusiasm for this land he had claimed as home, and she could hear the pride beneath his words. The ranch came into view as they crested a low rise, and Helena caught her breath at the sight. A sturdy 2-story house built of honey-colored wood stood at the center of the property, with a large barn, several corrals and outbuildings spread around it. Horses grazed in the fenced pastures, their coats gleaming in the afternoon sun. Mountains rose behind the property, and a line of cottonwood trees marked what was likely a creek running through the land. "Welcome to Palmer Ranch," Elijah said, and she could hear the quiet pride in his voice. "It is not much compared to some of the big spreads around here, but it is ours, free and clear." A woman emerged from the house as they approached, shielding her eyes against the sun. She was small and slender with blonde hair pulled back in a practical bun, wearing a simple blue dress and apron. A little girl with dark pigtails peeked out from behind her skirts. Elijah dismounted and helped Helena down, his hands steady at her waist. "Isabel, this is Miss Helena Thompson. She is Henry Thompson's niece from Kansas. She arrived in town to find her uncle dead and was robbed by the Dalton brothers this afternoon. I told her she could stay here with us." Isabel's blue eyes widened with sympathy, and she immediately stepped forward, reaching for Helena's hands. "You poor dear. Of course you must stay with us. Come inside immediately, you look exhausted. Sarah, run and fetch some fresh water for Miss Thompson." The little girl scampered off, and Helena felt tears threatening again, this time from gratitude rather than despair. "Thank you, Mrs. Palmer. I promise I will not be a burden. I can cook and sew and help with whatever needs doing." "We will talk about all that later," Isabel said firmly, already guiding Helena toward the house. "Right now you need rest and a good meal. Elijah, where is Thomas?" "Working the horses in the north pasture, last I heard," Elijah replied. He caught Helena's eye and gave her a small, reassuring smile. "You are safe now, Miss Thompson. Get some rest, and we will talk more at supper." Helena nodded, unable to find words to express the overwhelming relief and confusion swirling through her. She let Isabel lead her into the house, acutely aware of Elijah's gaze following her until the door closed between them. The house was simple but well built, with a large main room that served as kitchen and sitting area, a stone fireplace dominating one wall. Isabel showed Helena upstairs to a small bedroom with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the mountains. "This was our storage room until recently," Isabel explained, "but we cleared it out last month thinking we might hire seasonal help. The mattress is new, and I will bring you some clean linens. Do you have any belongings?" "Everything I owned was in the bag the Dalton brothers stole," Helena admitted, her voice thick. "Even my mother's wedding ring was in there." Isabel's expression tightened with anger. "Those men are a plague on this territory. The law does nothing, and they grow bolder every month." She placed a gentle hand on Helena's shoulder. I have extra dresses that we can alter to fit you. We are about the same height, though you are a bit fuller in the bust. We will manage. Right now, why don't you wash up? There is a basin and pitcher on the dresser, and I will bring you some soap and a towel." True to her word, Isabel returned moments later with the promised items, along with a simple cotton dress in a soft green color. This should fit reasonably well. "When you are ready, come down and I will make you some lunch. Elijah was right to bring you here, Miss Thompson. A woman alone in this territory faces dangers that should not be spoken of. You will be safe with us." After Isabel left, Helena sank onto the bed and let herself absorb everything that had happened in the past few hours. This morning she had been alone, terrified with no prospects and no hope. Now she was in a comfortable bedroom in a ranch house, offered safety and work by people who had no reason to help her except basic human decency. And there was something about Elijah Palmer, something in the way he had looked at her and spoken to her, that made her heart beat faster despite all reason and caution. She rose and washed her face and hands, then changed into the dress Isabel had provided. It fit surprisingly well, only a bit tight across the shoulders. She braided her long auburn hair, which had come loose from its pins during the attack, and studied her reflection in the small mirror above the dresser. Her hazel eyes were red-rimmed from crying, her face pale beneath the freckles that dusted her cheeks and nose. She was 21 years old and looked every day of the hard life she had lived. Downstairs, she found Isabel preparing lunch while Sarah sat at the large wooden table, carefully drawing pictures on a slate. The little girl looked up with bright, curious eyes as Helena entered. "Are you going to live with us?" Sarah asked with the directness of children. "For a while at least," Helena replied, smiling at the child, "if that is all right with you." "I like having more people here," Sarah declared. "Uncle Elijah is nice, but he is always working with the horses and Mama is busy all the time. Do you know any stories?" "Sarah, give Miss Thompson some peace," Isabel chided gently, but she was smiling. "Sit down, Helena. May I call you Helena? Please do, and thank you." Helena took a seat at the table, and moments later Isabel set before her a plate with thick slices of bread, butter, cold roasted chicken, and fresh tomatoes. Her stomach growled audibly, reminding her that she had not eaten since dawn. As Helena ate, Isabel kept up a steady stream of conversation that required little response, clearly understanding that Helena needed time to process her circumstances. She learned that Thomas Palmer was 26, 2 years younger than Elijah, and that the brothers were close despite having different temperaments. She learned that Isabel had been married to her first husband for only 8 months before he died, and that she had fallen in love with Thomas's gentleness and quiet strength. "Elijah is different from Thomas," Isabel said as she poured Helena a cup of coffee. "Thomas is content to work with the horses and let the world pass him by. But Elijah, he has ambitions. He wants to build something lasting here, wants the Palmer name to mean something in this territory. He works himself half to death sometimes, driving himself to make this ranch succeed." "He seems very kind," Helena ventured carefully. Isabel smiled knowingly. "He is kind, but he is also lonely. He has had no time for courting, and frankly, there are not many unmarried women of good character in these parts. The few that are available have their sights set on richer prospects or have already chosen their beaux." She met Helena's eyes directly. "I tell you this not to make you uncomfortable, but because I saw how he looked at you. My brother-in-law is a good man who deserves happiness, but you need to know your own mind and heart before anything develops between you." Helena felt her cheeks flush hot. "Mrs. Palmer, I assure you I had no intention of—" "Call me Isabel, please, and I am not accusing you of anything," I simply want you to know that while you are welcome here regardless, Elijah is not the sort of man who takes interest in a woman lightly. If something grows between you, it will be serious, and you should be prepared for that." Isabel's expression softened. "But perhaps I am getting ahead of myself. You have been through a terrible ordeal today, and the last thing you need is me speculating about romance." Before Helena could respond, the door opened and two men entered, their faces lit with curiosity. Helena recognized Elijah immediately, though he had removed his vest and rolled up his shirt sleeves, revealing strong forearms bronzed by the sun. The man beside him was clearly his brother, with the same dark hair and strong features, though his eyes were brown instead of green and his build slightly leaner. "Thomas, this is Miss Helena Thompson," Elijah said, his gaze finding Helena's across the room and holding for a moment longer than necessary. "Helena, my brother Thomas." Thomas stepped forward and extended his hand, his smile warm and welcoming. "Any friend of Uncle Henry is welcome here, Miss Thompson. He was one of the first people to treat us fairly when we arrived in Provo. I am sorry for your loss." "Thank you," Helena replied, shaking his hand. "And thank you both for taking me in. I know it must seem strange, my just appearing like this." "Not strange at all," Thomas assured her. "These are hard times and decent people need to look out for each other. Besides, Isabel has been saying she could use help around here, especially with the garden and the preserving. She has been putting up vegetables and fruits for winter storage, and it is more work than one person can manage." "I would be happy to help with that," Helena said eagerly. "My mother taught me how to preserve and pickle. I can also sew and mend, and I am a decent cook." "Then it is settled," Elijah said, and something in his tone made it clear he was relieved. "You will stay here and work for your room and board. When you are ready, we can talk about wages as well, but for now, let us just focus on you getting settled." Over the next hour, Helena learned the rhythms of the Palmer household. Thomas and Elijah worked the horses from dawn until supper, with Thomas handling most of the direct training and Elijah managing the breeding program and business arrangements. Isabel ran the household and tended an impressive vegetable garden, while Sarah helped where she could and attended basic lessons that Isabel taught her each afternoon. That evening, they all sat down together for supper, and Helena found herself relaxing into the easy conversation and good-natured teasing between the brothers. Elijah sat across from her, and she caught him watching her several times, his expression thoughtful. When their eyes met, he did not look away but instead offered a small smile that made her pulse quicken. After the meal, Helena insisted on helping with the dishes despite Isabel's protests. As they worked side by side at the wash basin, Isabel said quietly, "You fit in well here already." "I am glad Elijah found you today." "So am I," Helena admitted, though it feels strange to say that given how the day began. "Sometimes the worst days lead us exactly where we need to be," Isabel observed. "When my first husband died, I thought my life was over. I was alone with a baby, no money, no prospects. Then I met Thomas and everything changed. Not immediately and not easily, but it changed." Helena thought about that as she prepared for bed that night, changing into a borrowed nightgown and sliding between the clean sheets. Through her window, she could see stars scattered thick across the black sky, so many more than had been visible in Kansas. The mountain air was cool and carried the scent of sage and pine. She should have been terrified, alone in a strange place with people she barely knew. Instead, she felt safer than she had in months, perhaps years. And when she closed her eyes, she saw Elijah's face, those green eyes steady and sure, and heard his voice saying, "Your tears end today." Perhaps he was right. Perhaps this was the beginning of something new, something good. Only time would tell. But for the first time since her parents died, Helena let herself hope. The next morning, Helena woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the sound of roosters crowing. She dressed quickly in another borrowed dress, this one a faded blue calico, and headed downstairs to find the household already bustling with activity. Elijah and Thomas had already eaten and gone out to work the horses, and Isabel was packing lunch pails for them while Sarah set the table. "Good morning," Isabel greeted her cheerfully. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," Helena admitted. "What can I do to help, if you are willing? I could use help picking the ripe tomatoes and beans from the garden. We need to start canning today before they spoil." Isabel handed her a large basket. "Take Sarah with you. She likes to help, though she eats as many as she picks." Sarah giggled and took Helena's hand, leading her out the back door to where the garden stretched in neat rows behind the house. Helena was impressed by the size and organization of it, with everything from tomatoes and beans to squash, carrots, onions, and even a patch of strawberries. "Mama says we have to grow our own food because the winters are too long to rely on the store," Sarah explained importantly as they began picking ripe tomatoes. "Uncle Elijah built all these boxes and helped carry water when we had the dry spell last month." Helena found herself smiling at the little girl's chatter as they worked. The morning was pleasant, the air still cool before the day's heat arrived, and the simple task of harvesting vegetables felt grounding after yesterday's chaos. They had filled 2 baskets when she heard bootsteps approaching and looked up to find Elijah walking toward them. He had his hat pushed back and his sleeves rolled up, and there was a smudge of dirt on his jaw that Helena found oddly endearing. "Morning," he said, his eyes finding hers immediately. "Isabel said you were out here. I wanted to check on you, make sure you are settling in all right." "I am well, thank you," Helena replied, acutely aware of Sarah watching them with bright, curious eyes. "This is good work, peaceful." "Good." Elijah crouched down beside them, seemingly in no hurry to return to his own tasks. "I am heading into town this afternoon to meet with a rancher about buying 2 of our mares. I thought you might want to come along, file a report with the sheriff about the robbery, even though it probably will not amount to much." Helena had not thought about facing the Dalton brothers or even the memory of the attack again, but Elijah was right that it should be reported. "I should do that, yes, thank you. We can also stop by the church. Pastor Roberts runs a charity fund for folks in need. It is not much, but it might help you get a few things of your own, some clothes and necessities." Elijah pulled a tomato off a plant and examined it critically. "And I want to check on something else while we are in town. A friend of mine mentioned that someone found a leather bag tossed in the alley behind the saloon yesterday evening. Might be yours." Hope flared in Helena's chest. "Really? They might have just taken the money and thrown the rest away." "It is possible. The Dalton brothers are not known for their cleverness, just their meanness. If they found your money, they might not have cared about the other items." He stood, dusting off his hands. "We will leave after lunch. Wear your bonnet, the sun is fierce this time of day." He walked back toward the barn and Sarah tugged on Helena's sleeve. "Uncle Elijah likes you," the little girl announced with the blunt honesty of children. "He never takes time away from work to talk to people usually. Mama says he is married to the ranch." Helena felt her cheeks warm. "He is just being kind, Sarah." "Maybe," Sarah said thoughtfully, "but he looks at you the way Papa looks at Mama." They finished harvesting and carried the heavy baskets back to the house. Helena spent the rest of the morning helping Isabel prepare jars for canning, sterilizing them in boiling water and setting up the work area. The kitchen grew hot and steamy, but there was something satisfying about the work, about preparing food that would sustain this family through the harsh winter ahead. At lunch, Helena was again struck by the easy camaraderie among the family members. Thomas told a funny story about a young stallion who had developed a habit of stealing hats off anyone who came near his stall, and Sarah begged to be allowed to help feed the horses that evening. Elijah mostly listened, but Helena noticed he watched her frequently, as if still trying to figure out this stranger who had entered their lives. After the meal, Helena changed into the green dress again and borrowed a bonnet from Isabel. She met Elijah at the wagon, and he helped her up onto the bench seat before climbing up beside her and taking the reins. The wagon was loaded with supplies to deliver to the general store in town, part of a barter arrangement Elijah had worked out with the new owner. As they rolled down the dusty road toward Provo, Elijah said, "I want you to know that you do not have to worry about the Dalton brothers while you are in town. They know me, and they know I am not a man to cross. As long as you are with me, they will not bother you." "Have you had trouble with them before?" Helena asked. "Some. They tried to steal horses from us about 6 months back. I caught them in the act and made it clear what would happen if they tried again." His jaw tightened. "I am not a violent man by nature, Miss Thompson, but I protect what is mine." The intensity in his voice sent a shiver through Helena, though not of fear. "I appreciate you looking out for me, Elijah. I still cannot quite believe you took me in like you did. Most men would have walked right past me at that well." "I am not most men," he said simply. "And I cannot abide seeing anyone in distress, especially a woman alone. My mother always taught Thomas and me that character is shown in how we treat those who cannot help us in return." They talked more easily during the ride, and Helena learned that Elijah was 28, 6 years older than herself. He had taught himself to read and write as a child, hungry for knowledge even when his family had barely enough to eat. He dreamed of someday breeding a line of horses that would be recognized throughout the Western territories for their strength and endurance. "It is more than just business to me," he explained as the town came into view. "Horses gave me a second chance at life when I had nothing. I want to honor that, create something worthwhile." At the sheriff's office, Helena gave her statement about the robbery to a bored-looking deputy who wrote down the details with obvious reluctance. Elijah stood beside her the entire time, his presence a quiet support. As they left the office, he muttered, "That will go nowhere, but at least it is on record." The church visit proved more fruitful. Pastor Roberts was a kind elderly man who listened to Helena's story with genuine sympathy, and provided her with a small sum of money from the charity fund, along with the address of a widow who had recently passed whose family was selling her clothes. "She was about your size," the pastor said gently. "I am sure her daughter would be willing to part with a few dresses for a reasonable price." Their last stop was the saloon, though Elijah made Helena wait outside while he went in to inquire about the leather bag. She stood in the shade of the porch, ignoring the curious stares of passers-by, until Elijah emerged carrying a familiar worn bag. "Is this it?" he asked, and Helena nearly cried with relief. "Yes, that is mine." She took it and opened it quickly, finding everything except the money still inside. The deed to her family's burned property, her mother's Bible with family names inscribed inside, and most importantly, the small daguerreotype photograph of her parents on their wedding day. "Oh, thank God! I thought I had lost this forever." "The bartender found it this morning," Elijah explained. "He is one of the few honest men in that establishment. He was going to turn it over to the sheriff's office, but I saved him the trouble." Helena clutched the bag to her chest, overwhelmed by gratitude. "Thank you, Elijah, for everything. I do not know how I will ever repay this kindness." He looked at her with those steady green eyes, and something passed between them, a current of awareness that made Helena's breath catch. You do not owe me anything, Helena. Seeing you smile is payment enough." They purchased the dresses from the widow's daughter and loaded them into the wagon along with a few other necessities Elijah insisted on buying for her: a hairbrush, some soap, and a new pair of work gloves. Helena protested the expense, but Elijah waved her off. "You are part of the household now. We take care of our own. Part of the household." The words warmed Helena more than they should have, and she found herself studying Elijah's profile as they drove back to the ranch. He was handsome in a rugged, weathered way, but it was more than his appearance that drew her. It was the steadiness of him, the quiet competence, the way he seemed to see her not as a burden or a charity case, but as a person of worth. When they arrived back at the ranch, Thomas came out to help unload the wagon, and he raised his eyebrows when he saw Helena's recovered bag. "Well, that is a stroke of luck. Those Dalton boys must have been drunker than usual to toss away potential valuables. Or they just wanted the cash and could not be bothered with the rest," Elijah said. He handed Helena down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist for just a moment longer than necessary. "Go show Isabel your things. She will be pleased." That evening after supper, Helena showed Isabel and Sarah the photograph of her parents. Isabel held it carefully, studying the young couple frozen in time. "They look happy," she said softly. "You have your mother's eyes." "And her stubbornness, according to my father," Helena said with a sad smile. "They were good people, hard-working and faithful. They deserved better than to die the way they did." Isabel handed the photograph back. "Life is rarely fair, but I believe they would be proud to see how you have carried on. You have not let grief destroy you." Over the following weeks, Helena settled into the rhythm of life at the Palmer Ranch. She woke at dawn to help Isabel prepare breakfast for the men, then spent her mornings working in the garden, preserving food, mending clothes, and doing the countless other tasks that kept a household running. In the afternoons, she helped Isabel teach Sarah her letters and numbers, and in the evenings, she sat with the family and listened to their stories. But it was the moments with Elijah that began to define her days. He found reasons to seek her out, to show her the new foal that had been born, to ask her opinion on which horses to breed, to simply sit beside her on the porch steps after supper and watch the sun set behind the mountains. Their conversations ranged from the practical to the profound, and Helena found herself sharing things she had never told anyone, her fears and dreams and the deep loneliness she had carried since her parents died. Elijah, in turn, opened up to her in ways that surprised even Thomas. He told her about the fear he had felt when he and Thomas first arrived in Utah with almost nothing, about the prejudice they had faced from established ranchers who saw them as upstart interlopers, about the bone-deep satisfaction he felt when he stood on his own land and knew it was truly his. "I want to build something that will last," he said one evening as they sat together, the stars beginning to emerge overhead. "Not just a ranch that makes money, but a real legacy. I want children someday who will grow up here knowing they have roots, a place they belong." Helena's heart stuttered at the mention of children, and she found herself imagining what his children might look like, whether they would have his green eyes. "That is a good dream," she said softly. "Family and home, those are the things that matter most." He turned to look at her, and in the fading light his expression was intense. "What about you, Helena? What do you want from life?" she thought carefully before answering. "I want to matter to someone. I want to build something too, not land or horses, but a life that has meaning. I want to love and be loved, to have children who will remember me as someone who made their world better." She paused, then added quietly, "I thought I had lost the chance for that when my parents died, but being here with all of you, it has given me hope again." Elijah reached over and took her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. "You matter, Helena. To all of us, but especially to me. I need you to know that." They sat in silence, hands clasped, and Helena felt something shift between them, some invisible line being crossed. She knew that Isabel had been right, that whatever was growing between her and Elijah was serious and could not be ignored or dismissed. The question was whether she was brave enough to pursue it, to risk her heart again after so much loss. The answer came to her as naturally as breathing. Yes. She was brave enough, because Elijah was worth the risk. The autumn arrived in earnest in late September, bringing cooler nights and the first hints of gold in the aspens that dotted the mountainsides. Helena had been at the ranch for 6 weeks, and she felt more at home than she had anywhere since her parents died. She had altered the purchased dresses to fit her properly, and even made a new one from fabric Elijah had bought on his last trip to Salt Lake City. She knew the routines of the household and the idiosyncrasies of each member, knew that Thomas liked his coffee black and strong while Elijah preferred his with a little sugar, knew that Sarah would only eat carrots if they were mixed into stew, knew that Isabel hummed hymns while she cooked. And she knew that she was falling in love with Elijah Palmer. It showed in 1,000 small ways. The way her heart lifted when she heard his voice in the morning. The way she found excuses to bring him water while he worked in the corrals, just to see him smile at her. The way she lay awake at night, thinking about the conversations they had shared and wondering if he thought about her too. Isabel noticed, of course. She said nothing directly, but Helena caught her watching them with a knowing smile, and once when Helena was distracted and burned the biscuits because she was watching Elijah through the window, Isabel simply laughed and said, "I remember those days. Being in love makes you forget everything else." "I am not," Helena started to protest, then stopped. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to anyone with eyes," Isabel said gently. "But do not worry, Elijah is just as distracted. Thomas says he has never seen his brother so caught up in a woman before. Half the time Elijah does not even hear when Thomas talks to him because he is thinking about you." Helena flushed with pleased embarrassment. "I do not want to disrupt the household." "If this is causing problems, the only problem," Isabel interrupted, "is that you are both dancing around each other instead of just admitting how you feel. But that will work itself out in time." That time came sooner than expected. It was a Friday afternoon in early October, and Helena had spent the morning helping Thomas groom some of the horses they were preparing to sell. She was brushing down a gentle mare named Clover when Elijah appeared in the barn doorway. "Thomas, can you take over here?" he asked. "I need to borrow Helena for a bit." Thomas looked between them and grinned. "Sure thing, brother. Take your time." Elijah led Helena out of the barn and toward the creek that ran through the property. Neither of them spoke, but Helena's heart was pounding so hard she was certain he must hear it. They followed the creek upstream until they reached a spot where cottonwood trees provided shade and the water tumbled over smooth stones. "I love this spot," Elijah said, stopping beside the water. "I come here when I need to think, to sort things out in my head." "It is beautiful," Helena agreed, but she was not looking at the creek. She was looking at him. He turned to face her, and she saw nervousness in his expression, uncertainty that was at odds with his usual confidence. "Helena, I need to talk to you about something, and I am not sure how to say it right." "Just say it plainly," she encouraged, her own nerves making her voice shake slightly. "We have always been honest with each other. All right." He took a deep breath. "You have been here almost 2 months now, and in that time my life has changed in ways I did not expect. I find myself thinking about you constantly. When I wake up, my first thought is whether you slept well. When I am working, I am listening for your voice. When I go to bed, I am replaying our conversations in my mind. And Helena, I need to know if you feel anything similar or if I am a fool imagining things that are not there." Her breath caught. "You are not a fool, Elijah. I feel it too, all of it." Relief and something deeper, something fierce and tender all at once, washed over his face. "I am not a man who knows fancy words or how to court a woman properly. I am rough around the edges, and my life is hard work from dawn to dark. But I can promise you this. If you would consider letting me court you properly, letting this thing between us grow into something real, I will spend every day trying to be worthy of you." Helena stepped closer, looking up into those green eyes that had been the first thing to make her feel safe again. "Elijah, you saved me that day at the well, but not just from those thieves. You saved me from despair, from the belief that I had nothing left worth living for. You showed me kindness when I needed it most, and you have given me a home when I had nowhere to go. You are already worthy. The question is whether you think I am worthy of you." "You are worth everything," he said roughly, and then his hands were framing her face, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "May I kiss you, Helena, please?" she whispered. His lips met hers softly at first, tentative and questioning. But when Helena rose on her toes and wrapped her arms around his neck, the kiss deepened, becoming something urgent and claiming. His arms came around her waist, pulling her close against him, and Helena felt the world narrow down to just this moment. Just the two of them beneath the cottonwood trees with the creek singing its endless song. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elijah rested his forehead against hers. "I am courting you now," he said firmly, "officially and properly. And Helena, I need you to know that I am courting you with the intention of making you my wife, if you will have me when the time comes." Joy burst through her chest like sunlight breaking through clouds. "I would like that very much." They walked back to the ranch hand in hand, and when Thomas saw them, he let out a whoop of delight. "Finally! Isabel, you owe me $5. I said he would make his move before October 15th. Isabel emerged from the house, saw them, and shook her head with a smile. "I thought you would wait until Christmas, being the cautious one. Well, I am happy to lose that bet." She came forward and hugged Helena tightly. "Welcome to the family, truly." "We are just courting," Helena protested, though she was smiling. "He has not even asked me to marry him yet." "He will," Isabel said confidently. "And when he does, you will say yes, and we will have a wedding right here on the ranch." She was right, though it took longer than Helena expected. Elijah took his courtship seriously, treating her with a combination of respect and affection that made her fall more in love with him every day. He brought her wildflowers from the mountains. He taught her to ride his horse Redwood properly. He sat with her on the porch every evening and told her stories about his childhood, his dreams, his fears. And he kissed her at every opportunity, slow, burning kisses that made her knees weak and her heart race. They navigated the delicate balance of living in the same household while courting, trying to maintain propriety while their attraction to each other grew stronger every day. More than once, Thomas or Isabel had to clear their throats to interrupt a moment that was becoming too heated for unmarried people. But there was something sweet about the restraint too, the anticipation building toward a future they both wanted. Winter arrived in November with the first heavy snowfall, blanketing the ranch in white and limiting their ability to work outside. The family spent more time together indoors, and Helena taught Sarah how to knit, while Elijah and Thomas repaired tack and equipment. The enforced closeness only strengthened the bonds among them all. On Christmas Eve, the family attended services at the church in Provo, then returned home for a simple but joyful celebration. Elijah had carved Sarah a wooden horse, and Thomas and Isabel gave each other small, meaningful gifts. Helena had knitted scarves for everyone, her first successful knitting project. When it was just the two of them on the porch that night, the air crisp and cold and the stars brilliant overhead, Elijah pulled a small box from his pocket. "I was going to wait until spring," he said, "but I cannot any more. I do not want to spend another day not knowing for certain that you will be my wife." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small garnet stone. "It was my grandmother's ring. My mother gave it to me before she died and told me to give it to the woman I wanted to spend my life with. Helena Thompson, will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Helena's face, but she was smiling so wide her cheeks hurt. "Yes, Elijah Palmer. Yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring on her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he was kissing her, and she was kissing him back, and nothing else mattered except this man and this moment and this perfect, impossible joy. They were married in February on a clear cold day when the mountains sparkled with snow and the sky was so blue it hurt to look at. Pastor Roberts performed the ceremony in the ranch house with Thomas and Isabel as witnesses and Sarah as an enthusiastic flower girl. Helena wore a dress that Isabel had helped her sew from cream-colored fabric, simple but beautiful, and Elijah wore his best suit and looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. When Pastor Roberts pronounced them husband and wife, Elijah cupped her face in his hands and kissed her with such tenderness that Helena heard Isabel sniffle, and even Thomas cleared his throat roughly. They celebrated with a dinner that Helena and Isabel had prepared together, and then the family gave them privacy. Thomas and Isabel taking Sarah to stay in the barn loft for the night so the newlyweds could have the house to themselves. Helena had been nervous about her wedding night, but Elijah was patient and gentle, taking his time to show her pleasure before claiming his own. Afterward, lying in his arms in the bed they would now share, Helena thought about how far she had come from that day at the well when she had thought her life was over. "What are you thinking about?" Elijah murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That day you found me," she said softly. "When you told me my tears ended that day, you were right. Everything changed when you walked up to that well." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "I fell in love with you that day, I think. I just did not recognize it yet. You were so broken but so brave, and I wanted nothing more than to make you smile." "You did more than that," Helena said. "You gave me a home, a family, a future. You gave me hope." "We gave each other those things," Elijah corrected. "I was only half alive before you came. You made me want to be better, to build something worth leaving behind." They fell asleep, tangled together, and when Helena woke in the morning to find Elijah watching her with soft eyes, she thought there could be nothing more perfect than this. The years that followed were not always easy, but they were good. The ranch prospered under Elijah's careful management, and their reputation for quality horses spread throughout Utah and beyond. Thomas remained their most skilled trainer, and Isabel continued to run the household with efficiency and warmth. Sarah grew into a bright, energetic child who loved helping with the horses. Helena discovered she was pregnant in April, just 2 months after the wedding. She and Elijah were overjoyed, though she insisted on continuing her work around the ranch despite his attempts to coddle her. Their son was born in January of 1880, a healthy baby with dark hair and his father's green eyes. They named him Samuel, after Elijah's father, and he became the center of their world. Watching Elijah with their son, seeing the tenderness with which he held the baby and the wonder in his eyes, made Helena fall in love with him all over again. He was a devoted father, finding time even in his busy days to play with Samuel, to tell him stories, to teach him about the horses. Their daughter Emma was born 2 years later, with Helena's auburn hair and hazel eyes, and then another son, Joshua, arrived 2 years after that. The house rang with children's laughter, and Helena sometimes had to pinch herself to believe this was her life now, so different from the lonely despair she had felt that day at the well. Thomas and Isabel had children of their own as well. First a boy they named Daniel, then another daughter called Margaret. The ranch had to expand to accommodate the growing family, and they built a second house for Thomas and Isabel about a quarter-mile from the original homestead. As the children grew, Helena and Elijah told them the story of how they met, of the day Elijah found Helena crying at the well and brought her home. "Your mama was so sad," Elijah would say, "but so beautiful and brave, and I knew right then that I wanted to spend my life making her happy." "Did you know you would marry her?" Samuel asked once when he was about 7 years old. Elijah looked at Helena, and the love in his eyes made her breath catch even after all these years. "I think some part of me did. Not consciously, but somewhere deep down, I recognized her as the other half of my soul." Helena reached over and took his hand, squeezing it gently. Their love had only deepened over the years, weathering the challenges that came with ranch life, financial pressures, illnesses, and losses. They had buried Isabel's daughter Sarah when she was just 14, taken by scarlet fever, and the grief had nearly broken them all. But they had held each other up through that dark time, and their love had emerged stronger. By 1895, when Helena was 38 and Elijah 44, the Palmer Ranch was one of the most respected horse operations in Utah. They had 30 employees and bred horses that were sought after by ranchers, the army, and wealthy buyers throughout the West. Samuel, now 15, was already showing his father's business acumen, while Emma at 13 had inherited Elijah's gift with animals. Joshua at 11 was still trying to find his place but showed promise as a blacksmith, working with the ranch's farrier. On a warm August evening, Helena and Elijah sat together on the porch of the house they had expanded over the years, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The sounds of their children and Thomas's children playing in the yard drifted to them, punctuated by Isabel calling everyone to wash up for supper. "You ever think about that day?" Helena asked quietly, her head resting on Elijah's shoulder. "The day we met, all the time," Elijah replied. "I think about how easily I might have ridden past the well, might have been too busy to stop, how different my life would be without you. I think about how close I came to giving up entirely," Helena admitted. "I had nothing left to live for, or so I thought. If you had not stopped, if you had not offered me hope when I needed it most." Elijah turned and tilted her face up to his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "But I did stop, and you did accept my help, and we built this beautiful life together. That is what matters." "I love you," Helena said, the words as true and necessary as they had been the first time she said them. "Thank you for seeing me that day, for not walking past my pain." "I love you too," Elijah replied. "More every day. You are my heart, Helena. You always will be." They kissed softly, tenderly, the kiss of two people who had weathered storms together and come out stronger. Around them, their family called for them to come eat, and reluctantly they rose to join the chaos and love of the dinner table. As Helena sat surrounded by her husband and children, by Thomas and Isabel and their family, she thought about Pastor Roberts's words at her wedding. He had said that love was not just a feeling but a choice, made new every day. She and Elijah had chosen each other every day for 17 years now, through good times and hard times, through joy and sorrow. And she knew, with the certainty that had become the bedrock of her life, that she would keep choosing him every day for the rest of her years. He had found her crying at a well and told her that her tears would end that day, and he had been right. He had given her a home, A family, a love that transformed everything. Her tears had indeed ended that day, replaced by a joy and contentment she had never thought possible. And it had all begun with a cowboy who saw a woman in need and offered her more than help. He had offered her a future, and together they had built a life worth living. The years continued to pass in that steady, inexorable way they do, marking the passage from youth to middle age with equal parts grace and challenge. By the turn of the century in 1900, the Palmer Ranch had become a fixture of Utah's horse breeding landscape, and both Helena and Elijah wore the comfortable mantle of age and accomplishment. Helena at 43 was still a beautiful woman, though her auburn hair now showed threads of silver, and the lines around her eyes spoke of years spent smiling in the sun. Elijah at 50 showed more silver than dark in his hair, but he remained strong and vital, still working the ranch from dawn to dusk, though Samuel increasingly took over the day-to-day management. Their children were growing into remarkable adults. Samuel at 20 was engaged to a sweet girl named Mary from a neighboring ranch, and they planned to marry in the spring. Emma at 18 had just announced her engagement to a young veterinarian who had come to Provo to set up practice. Joshua at 16 was still finding his way, but showed every sign of becoming a fine blacksmith, his work increasingly sought after by other ranchers. Thomas and Isabel's children were also thriving. Daniel was working as a lawyer in Salt Lake City, while Margaret had married and moved to Denver with her husband. The family remained close despite the distances, gathering for holidays and important occasions. It was at Christmas in 1900 that Helena sat with Isabel in the kitchen, preparing the feast while the men were out checking on the horses. They had been doing this together for over 20 years now, and they worked with the seamless efficiency of long practice. "Can you believe it has been 22 years since Elijah brought you home?" Isabel asked, peeling potatoes with quick, practiced movements. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like you have always been here." "I know what you mean," Helena said, stirring the pudding mixture she was preparing. "Sometimes I still have moments where I am overwhelmed by how lucky I am, how different my life could have been." "It was not luck," Isabel said firmly. "It was love and choice and faith. You and Elijah built this life together through hard work and dedication to each other." Helena smiled, her eyes distant with memory. "I remember being so frightened that first night here, terrified that I was making a mistake trusting a stranger, that something terrible would happen. But Elijah was exactly who he appeared to be, a good man who kept his word." "He is the best of men," Isabel agreed. "Thomas always said his brother deserved happiness more than anyone he knew, because Elijah spent so much time making sure everyone else was taken care of." "I am glad he found you, Helena. You gave him something to live for beyond just work and duty." That evening, as the family gathered around the expanded dining table that could barely hold them all now, Elijah stood and raised his glass. "I want to propose a toast," he said, his voice carrying the authority of years. "To family, to the blessings we have been given, and to the woman who made all of this possible." He looked directly at Helena, his green eyes still as intense as they had been when he first saw her at the well. 22 years ago, I found the other half of my soul crying at a well in town. I promised her that her tears would end that day, and she trusted me enough to come home with me. That trust, that leap of faith, has given me everything worth having in this life. To Helena, my wife, my partner, my love." "To Helena," the family chorused, raising their glasses. Helena felt tears prickling her eyes, but they were happy tears, tears of gratitude and joy. She raised her own glass and looked around the table at the faces she loved so dearly. "And to Elijah," she said softly, "who taught me that home is not a place but a person, and that love can heal even the deepest wounds." They drank together, and then the meal descended into the happy chaos of family conversations, multiple discussions happening at once, children begging for more stories about the old days, plans being made for upcoming weddings and visits. Helena sat beside her husband, their hands clasped beneath the table, and thought that this was what life was supposed to be. Not perfect, not without challenges or sorrows, but full of love and purpose and connection. Samuel and Mary were married in April of 1901, and Helena cried happy tears as she watched her oldest son pledge his life to his bride. Elijah squeezed her hand and whispered, "He has found what we found. He is a lucky man." Emma and her veterinarian, a kind young man named Robert, were married that September. The wedding was held at the ranch, just as Helena and Elijah's had been, and as Helena watched her daughter exchange vows, she remembered her own wedding day, how nervous and excited and certain she had been. In 1903, Samuel and Mary had their first child, a daughter they named Helena after her grandmother. When Helena held her tiny namesake for the first time, she was overwhelmed by the continuity of it all, the way life moved forward in these beautiful, repeating patterns. Elijah stood beside her, one arm around her waist, looking down at their granddaughter with wonder. "We made this possible," he said quietly. "All of it, the whole next generation, it exists because we found each other." "Because you stopped at a well when you could have ridden past," Helena corrected gently. "Because you had the courage to offer help to a stranger. Because you had the courage to accept it," Elijah countered. "Trust is the harder part, Helena. You took a leap of faith that day, and I have spent every day since then trying to prove myself worthy of that trust." She turned to kiss him softly, this man who had been her savior, her husband, her partner through 2 decades of life. "You proved yourself worthy the moment you said my tears would end. You kept that promise, Elijah. Every single day you have kept that promise." By 1905, the Palmer Ranch had been passed primarily into Samuel's capable hands, though Elijah still consulted on major decisions and could often be found working alongside the younger men. Helena had stepped back from much of the heavy household work, instead focusing on her grandchildren, teaching them the same skills her mother had taught her. Thomas had developed arthritis in his hands and could no longer train horses as he once had, but he remained a valued advisor. Isabel had become the grandmother to the entire extended family, always ready with cookies and stories and unconditional love. It was in the spring of 1906, 28 years after that fateful day at the well, that Helena and Elijah took a trip back to Provo to attend the dedication of a new church building. As they drove through town in their wagon, Helena asked Elijah to stop at the old well in the town square. He helped her down, and they stood together looking at the stone structure that had witnessed the beginning of their love story. The well was still in use, though the town had grown up around it, and newer buildings now lined the streets. "Right here," Helena said softly, placing her hand on the sun-warmed stone. "I was sitting right here when you found me. I was so lost, Elijah, so completely without hope." He put his arm around her, pulling her close. "And now look at us. 2 old people with a family that spans generations, with a legacy that will outlast us both." "Not so old," Helena protested, though she was smiling. "We still have years ahead of us." "I hope so," Elijah said seriously, "because I am not finished loving you yet, Mrs. Palmer. I do not think I ever will be." They kissed beside the well, 2 people in their middle years who had found each other when they needed it most, whose love had built something lasting and beautiful. People passed by and smiled at them, recognizing the romance of two people who had clearly loved each other for a very long time. As they walked back to the wagon, Helena said, "Tell me honestly, Elijah, in all these years, have you ever regretted stopping that day? Ever wished you had just ridden past?" He stopped walking and turned to face her fully, his hands coming up to cup her face. "Helena, marrying you was the best decision I ever made. Building this life with you has been my greatest accomplishment, greater than any business success or financial gain. You gave me purpose beyond just surviving. You gave me joy. So no, I have never, not for one single moment, regretted stopping at that well." "I love you," she said, the words as necessary as breathing. "Thank you for saving me that day." "We saved each other," he replied. "That is what love does. It saves us from loneliness, from despair, from the belief that we have to face the world alone." They returned to the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Their family was gathered for Sunday dinner, and as Helena and Elijah walked into the house hand in hand, they were greeted by the joyful chaos of children and grandchildren, of love and laughter and belonging. That night, lying in bed with Elijah's arms around her, Helena thought about all the moments that had brought them to this place. The tears at the well, the first wagon ride to the ranch, the slow building of trust and friendship that had blossomed into love, their wedding day, the births of their children, the challenges they had faced and overcome together, the quiet everyday moments that had woven their lives into an inseparable tapestry. "Elijah," she whispered into the darkness. "MMM." He sounded half asleep already, his voice drowsy and content. "My tears really did end that day. You kept your promise." His arms tightened around her. "Best promise I ever made." They fell asleep tangled together as they had been for 28 years. Two souls who had found each other in the midst of grief and loss, and had built something beautiful from the ashes of their former lives. The years continued their steady march forward. Emma and Robert had 3 children, and Joshua eventually married a schoolteacher named Grace, bringing even more joy to the extended Palmer family. The ranch continued to prosper under Samuel's management, and by 1910, the Palmer name was synonymous with quality horses throughout the western states. Helena and Elijah settled into the comfortable rhythm of grandparents, delighting in spoiling their grandchildren and passing on the stories and values that had sustained them through the years. They took walks together every evening when weather permitted, talking about everything and nothing, simply enjoying each other's company. On their 30th anniversary, in February of 1909, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Over 70 people filled the house and yard, testament to the family that Helena and Elijah had created together. As they cut into the cake that their daughters-in-law had made, Elijah pulled Helena close and whispered in her ear, "30 years ago, I married the woman I found crying at a well. Best decision I ever made." "Best decision I ever made was saying yes," Helena whispered back. "Both times, when you asked me to come home with you and when you asked me to marry you." They danced that evening, slowly and carefully, their bodies knowing each other so well that they moved as one. Their children and grandchildren watched with affection and respect, seeing in this aging couple a model of what love could be when tended carefully over decades. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Helena found a quiet moment with Isabel. Her sister-in-law was now 62, her blonde hair turned silver, but her eyes still sparkled with the same warmth and wisdom they always had. "You did good, Helena," Isabel said, hugging her tightly. "You took a chance on a stranger 31 years ago, and look what you built together. This family, this legacy, it is beautiful." "I was so scared," Helena admitted. That day Elijah brought me here, I was terrified, but you made me feel welcome and Elijah made me feel safe, and somehow it all worked out. It worked out because you both chose each other every single day, Isabel said firmly. Love is not just about the big romantic moments, though those are lovely. It is about the daily choice to be patient, to be kind, to see the best in each other even when things are hard. You and Elijah understood that from the beginning. Later that night, as Helena prepared for bed, she looked at herself in the mirror. She was 60 years old now, her face lined by decades of sun and laughter and tears. Her body was softer than it had been, marked by the bearing and nursing of 3 children. But when she looked at herself, she did not see the aging or the changes. She saw a woman who was deeply loved, who had built a life of meaning and purpose, who had no regrets. Elijah came up behind her and met her eyes in the mirror. "You are as beautiful now as you were the day I found you at that well," he said softly. "More beautiful, actually, because I know you now. I know every thought and dream and fear. I know what makes you laugh and what makes you cry. I know you, Helena, and loving you has been the privilege of my life." She turned in his arms and kissed him deeply, pouring 3 decades of love and gratitude into that kiss. "Take me to bed, husband," she whispered. "We still have years ahead of us, and I want to make the most of every moment." They made love slowly, tenderly, bodies that knew each other intimately moving together with practiced ease. And afterward, lying in each other's arms, Helena thought that this was what happily ever after really meant. Not perfection or the absence of challenges, but the presence of someone who chose you every day, who loved you through all the changes and seasons of life. The seasons continued to turn, bringing both joy and sorrow. Thomas passed away in 1912 at the age of 64, his heart simply giving out one morning as he sat on his porch watching the sun rise. The family mourned him deeply, but they also celebrated the full life he had lived and the legacy of kindness and skill he had left behind. Isabel moved into the main house with Helena and Elijah, and the 2 women who had been friends for over 3 decades became even closer, supporting each other through grief and age. By 1915, Helena and Elijah had 10 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren, with more on the way. The Palmer Ranch had expanded to cover over 500 acres, and Samuel had proven himself a worthy successor to his father's vision. Emma's husband Robert had become the most respected veterinarian in the territory, and Joshua's blacksmithing business was thriving. On a warm evening in August of 1918, 40 years after that fateful day at the well, Helena and Elijah sat together on the porch of the house they had shared for 4 decades. Elijah was 73 now, his hair completely silver, his movements slower but still purposeful. Helena was 69, her auburn hair now pure white, her face deeply lined but still beautiful in the way that comes from a life well lived. 40 years, Elijah said, looking out at the ranch that spread before them. Sometimes it feels like no time at all, and sometimes it feels like we have always been together. I cannot imagine my life without you, Helena said simply. Sometimes I try to remember what it felt like before I knew you, and I cannot. You have become so fundamental to who I am that I do not know where you end and I begin. Elijah reached over and took her hand, their fingers interlacing with the ease of long practice. When I found you at that well, crying as if your heart was broken, I had no idea that I was meeting the person who would define the rest of my life. I thought I was just helping someone in need. I did not know I was finding my other half. You told me my tears would end that day, Helena reminded him, her voice thick with emotion. And they did, Elijah. Every tear I have cried since then has been happy tears, tears of joy at this beautiful life we built together. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Their family was inside, preparing dinner, and soon they would be called to join them. But for now they had this moment, just the two of them, reflecting on the 40 years they had spent together. "If I had it to do over again," Elijah said suddenly, "I would not change a single thing. Every moment, good and bad, has been worth it because I spent it with you, even the hard times." Helena asked, "The years when money was tight, when we lost the full crop to disease, when we thought we might lose the ranch, especially those times," Elijah said firmly. "Because that is when we learned what we were really made of, when we discovered that our love was strong enough to weather any storm. Those hard times tested us and proved that we could face anything together." Helena leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. "I love you, Elijah Palmer. I have loved you for 40 years, and I will love you for however many years we have left. I love you too, Helena. You are my heart, my home, my everything." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Thank you for taking a chance on a strange cowboy who asked you to come home with him. Thank you for building this life with me." "Thank you for stopping," Helena whispered. "Thank you for seeing me, for caring, for keeping your promise that my tears would end." They stayed on the porch until the stars came out, bright and countless against the dark sky. Inside, their family called for them, but they took one more moment just for themselves to honor the love that had sustained them through 4 decades. When they finally went inside, hand in hand as always, they were greeted by the joyful chaos of a family dinner. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren ran around, laughing and playing. Samuel and Mary sat with Emma and Robert, discussing ranch business. Joshua and Grace entertained the younger children with silly songs. Isabel presided over the kitchen with the help of the younger women, making sure everyone had enough to eat. Helena looked around the crowded room and felt her heart swell with gratitude. All of this, every single person in this room, existed because 40 years ago a cowboy had stopped at a well to help a crying woman. That single act of kindness had rippled forward through time, creating this beautiful, complicated, loving family. After dinner, as the family lingered around the table talking and laughing, Samuel raised his glass. "I want to propose a toast," he said, and the room gradually quieted. "To my parents who have shown all of us what true love looks like. You taught us that marriage is not always easy, but it is always worth the effort. You taught us that family is the most important thing we can build. You taught us to be kind, to be faithful, to choose love every single day. Thank you for everything you have given us, and thank you for 40 years of showing us how it is done. To Mama and Papa." "To Mama and Papa," the family echoed, raising their glasses. Helena felt tears streaming down her face, but they were happy tears, tears of overwhelming joy and gratitude. She looked at Elijah and found him looking back at her with such love in his eyes that she felt like she was 21 again, standing by a well and hearing a stranger tell her that her tears would end that day. He had been right. Her tears of sorrow had ended that day, replaced by years of joy, love, laughter, and belonging. She had found not just a home but a purpose, not just a husband but a partner in every sense of the word. Together, they had built something that would last long after they were gone, a legacy of love that would continue through their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. That night, lying in bed with Elijah's arms around her as they had been for 40 years, Helena whispered into the darkness, "If I died tomorrow, I would die happy, knowing that I have lived a full and beautiful life." "Do not talk about dying," Elijah murmured, holding her closer. "We still have time, Helena. We still have years to love each other." "I know," she said, "but I want you to understand that you gave me everything I ever wanted from life. You gave me a home when I had none. You gave me love when I thought I would never feel it again. You gave me children and grandchildren and a family that will remember me. You gave me purpose and meaning. You gave me yourself, and that was the greatest gift of all." "You gave me all of those things too," Elijah said, his voice rough with emotion. "Before you, I was just existing, working and building but not really living. You taught me what it meant to truly live, to open my heart, to let someone in completely. You saved me just as much as I saved you that day at the well." They fell asleep holding each other. Two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment, who had chosen each other every single day for 40 years, who had built a love that would endure long after they were gone. The years that followed were gentler, slower. Helena and Elijah were now in their 70s, their bodies growing frailer but their love remaining as strong as ever. They spent their days sitting on the porch, watching their grandchildren and great-grandchildren play, telling stories about the old days and simply being together. In the spring of 1922, they celebrated their 44th anniversary with a quiet dinner, just family. Elijah was 77 now and moved slowly, but his mind was sharp and his love for Helena undiminished. Helena at 73 had survived a bout of pneumonia the previous winter and was more fragile than she liked to admit. That evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, Elijah said, "Do you remember that first sunset we watched together, the day I brought you home?" "I remember everything about that day," Helena replied. "I was so scared and so hopeful all at once. I did not know if I could trust you, but something in my heart told me I could." "Best thing that ever happened to both of us," Elijah said. "That day changed everything." They sat in peaceful silence, their hands clasped, their hearts beating in sync after so many years together. The mountains turned gold in the fading light, and somewhere in the house, their family was laughing and talking, living the lives that Helena and Elijah had made possible. "I am tired," Helena said softly, "but it is a good tired, the tired that comes from a life well lived." "I know what you mean," Elijah replied. "I am tired too, but I am not ready to leave you yet, Helena. I need more time." "We will have whatever time we are given," Helena said. "And every moment of it will be precious because we spend it together." They went inside eventually, their steps slow but steady, still holding hands as they had for over 4 decades. Their family greeted them with hugs and kisses, making sure they were comfortable before resuming their conversations. As Helena prepared for bed that night, she looked at Elijah, this man who had been her entire world for so long, and felt a wave of love so powerful it nearly knocked her breathless. He was old now, his body bent by years of hard work, his face lined by time and sun. But when she looked at him, she saw the young cowboy who had found her crying at a well and promised her that everything would be all right. "Come to bed, husband," she said softly. "Hold me like you have held me for 44 years." He came to her and pulled her into his arms, and they lay together in the darkness, two souls who had found each other and never let go. Outside, the wind whispered through the cottonwoods, and the horses moved quietly in their stalls, and the ranch slept peacefully under a blanket of stars. "I love you," Elijah whispered. "Always and forever I love you." "Always and forever," Helena echoed. "My tears ended the day you found me and my life truly began. Thank you for every moment, every day, every year." They fell asleep in each other's arms, and though neither of them knew it yet, they would have several more years together. Years filled with more grandchildren and great-grandchildren, more sunsets watched together, more quiet moments of perfect contentment. When Elijah finally passed away in his sleep in the winter of 1925 at the age of 80, he was surrounded by his family, and his last words were Helena's name. She held his hand and whispered that she loved him, that she would see him again, that he had made her life worth living. Helena lived for 3 more years after Elijah's passing, surrounded by the family they had built together, telling stories about the cowboy who had found her crying at a well and changed her life forever. She passed peacefully in her sleep in the spring of 1928, a smile on her face, and her grandchildren said she looked young again, as if death had stripped away the years and revealed the beautiful young woman who had taken a chance on love. They buried her beside Elijah on a hillside overlooking the ranch, and on their shared headstone, their family inscribed, "Elijah and Helena Palmer united in life, and in death your tears end today." The Palmer Ranch continued to thrive for generations, passed down through the family they had created. And every child born into the Palmer family learned the story of how it all began, with a cowboy who stopped at a well to help a crying woman, who offered her a home in his heart, and who kept his promise that her tears would end that day. It was a love story for the ages, built not on grand gestures or dramatic pronouncements, but on daily choices, on kindness and faith, and the courage to trust when trust seemed impossible. It was a love that created a family, a legacy, and a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from the moments when we choose to help someone in need, when we offer our hand to a stranger and say, "Come home with me." Helena's tears had indeed ended that day by the well in Provo, Utah, in the summer of 1878. They ended because a cowboy named Elijah Palmer had seen her pain and decided he could not ride past. They ended because she had found the courage to trust him. They ended because 2 lonely souls found each other at exactly the right moment and built something beautiful together. And that beautiful thing, that love story that began with tears and a promise, echoed forward through time, touching countless lives, creating joy where there had been sorrow, building hope where there had been despair. It was proof that love, real love, the kind that chooses and commits and endures, can heal the deepest wounds and create miracles. The tears ended that day and love began. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.